In this video, I'm going to be going over some more Windows tips, just like I did in the last video. Before that, I just wanted to go over another software that I use. This one is one I use for sketching. I guess it used to be paid and now it's free. It's pretty nice. It works well with my digitizer to draw on. I'm not a professional artist or anything like that, but it works pretty well for me. I don't think it's open source. If I do find a good open source one, I'll put it in a future video. But yeah, this one works well, and I believe it's the one that Saul Khan uses or used to use for his videos. I think this is the same one. I use OBS to record my screen. The first tip I want to go over was this has to do with one of the tips I'm going to go over, but the first one I wanted to go over was on a Mac from the terminal. You can open a folder, open to a folder from the command prompt. So that would look something like this. You're in this folder and you would go open and then dot to open the current folder. As you can see, it doesn't work in PowerShell, but the version of that for PowerShell is just Explorer. I believe this works for command prompt as well, and that works. Okay, so that's the first tip. The second tip is opening multiple instances of a program easily. Maybe there's another way to do this, but one nice way I found is if you want to open another, let's say command prompt, you could just right click on it and click on the program and it'll open another one. So if you have a couple of programs you want to open, like Notepad or whatever, multiple instances without having to search for them or open them a different way, you can just easily open it another instance if it's already open. Speaking of Notepad, if you do have a first I'm going to make a file in here. If you do have a file and you want to just open it in Notepad from here, you can just do Notepad and then the name of the file, and that'll open it. Okay, that's the second tip. Another tip is in another video I showed that this button in the lower right hand corner, you can barely see it, but it's in the lower right hand corner, will hide all the windows and basically minimize everything and show the desktop. There's also a keyboard shortcut that does that. If you hold the Windows key and press D, it does the same thing. Git bash, and if you're in a folder and you want to see what your options are, so I want to change directories. I have two directories here. If you just hit tab once, it won't show anything. If you hit tab again, it'll show your options of where you can change directory to. If you do like change CD and then D and you hit tab once, it'll fill that out, of course, as it should. But if you hit it twice, it'll show you the two options. Okay, so now the touch alias. So in git bash, you can type touch and then the name of a file, call it test2, and it'll create that file. And you can see this file has 0 KB. If I open it in VS Code, you can see that it creates the file with these line endings. It's not carriage return line feed, it's just line feed, and it has UTF-8 encoding, and it's size 0. So that's what we want, basically. By the way, another tip just for it with VS Code is if you have a file that has carriage return line feed, you can just click on this and it'll give the option to change it. You'd click on whichever one you want and then save it. So if you want to change the line endings in a file, that's one quick way to do it with VS Code. Okay, let's see. So back to the touch alias. So there's a few things you can do. And you'll see, actually, let me get to that in just a second. I'm actually going to close this and open up a command prompt. Okay. I want to open PowerShell within the command prompt. Okay, so now I'm using PowerShell commands. So I want to have a touch, something like touch. And I already have one, so that command would not normally work, but I'll show you how I set that up. If you don't want to go through the trouble of setting this up, which I'll show in just a moment, you can just use this, FC, and you can read the explanation here of how it works. It's just a command that basically it'll work because you don't, it does nothing the way it's used here, and it will just create the file. So you can use FC, and if you use a single caret, it will overwrite the file if it already exists, and if you use a double caret, it will not overwrite. So I'll show an example of that. So if I want to do FC test 4, and I do need a space there. It'll create that. Again, it has a size of 0, and the line endings are what we are looking for. UTF-8 and LF, and the encoding as well. If I were to create this with, there's a few options I've seen. If you do like that, and then send that to test 4, or sorry, test 5. See, that's going to create the encoding we don't want, and the carriage return line feed line endings we don't want. So that's a problem. You could also do, like I've seen, null test 1, and test 1 is now the wrong format. I did the single caret, so it overwrote test 1. So that's not what we want, really. So I would recommend using FC like that. You do need a space because this is a command. By the way, to see what that command is, and to see all of the commands like ls, fc, what they actually are commandlets, and these are aliases for them. So to see what the actual command is, you can type git alias, and it'll list all of them. So if we go up to FC, it's format custom, and if we want to see what that does, you can just go to the docs, and if you Google MSDN PowerShell, go here and go to reference, and then by the way, you want to make sure you are looking under your version of PowerShell. So if you want to check the version, let me go back to PowerShell. Again, we're in PowerShell within command prompt. Okay, so if you want to check the version, it's $PS version table, and then it'll show your version. And I'm on version 5.1, so that's here. And then in here you can just search for whatever. So format custom is the one we were searching for, and you can see that what that does, and you get a description of what that commandlet does. If you're not happy with FC for whatever reason, you still want this touch command, it's not built in. So to make that, what you want to do, a few things. So the first thing is you can get more information about what I'm going to go over at this link here at this site. It tells you about customizing the PowerShell profile, which is basically what I'm about to do. They do it in a slightly different way. But right now, if you type this command, test path profile, and you haven't created that path, then it will return false like they're showing here. But regardless of whether you created it or not, if you just do $profile, it's a variable, and it'll output the path that it's looking for. I don't know if you can change that. I'd probably recommend not to change that, but this will output the path that it's looking for a profile. And it'll tell you basically in this directory, at this path, you need to make a file named this. So you can do it with commands like they showed in that tutorial, or you can just go to that path, and I have it open here, and I have an Explorer window open to this path, and you could just make this file. And you could also make this directory if it doesn't exist. No problem. You just right click, new folder, and that'll work. And then you can just make this file as well. I'll delete it just for an example. And since I did delete it, the touch will be gone because that's where I had that touch function. So you could close this window, reopen it, but since I'm in PowerShell, right now, and within command prompt, I can just type exit and then PowerShell, and that will basically open up a new instance of PowerShell within the command prompt. So now if I try touch test, it'll tell me touch is not there. It doesn't exist. Okay. So now we're going to go over how to make that. So again, you make that file. So profile. You can just copy this. Control C to copy. New file. Select it all. And yes. Okay. And by the way, if you can't edit the file extensions or they're not showing, you can just hit view and then check this file extension names. And if you want to, after you're done, you can just check that again and hide the file extensions. Okay, so now I'm going to edit this, and it's going to open. I'm going to right click edit. You don't have to edit it in this editor, you could edit it anywhere, but by default it opens in the PowerShell ISE, which stands for PowerShell Integrated Scripting Environment. And by the way, if you ever want to get to that from a command prompt, you can just type ISE and it'll open it. Okay, but now I'm editing this file, the profile file that we just opened in ISE. And what you want to do is you can go to this page and copy. There's two things you can do here. You can copy this, which will overwrite the file if it exists, or I would recommend this because this acts more like the actual touch command. So just copy this and then paste it in, and you can save, and now you can close this. And just to go over this really quick, this test path is another command that you can search for what it does in the docs that we were just looking at, as well as the set content. Set content. You could also look for that. It's another commandlet, and you can see that case sensitivity is not an issue here because they're using lowercase. This args is just the first argument that you give it. So if you type touch, and then a file name, that'll be that file. And you can do a path as well, path to, and then file name and whatever. Okay, so that'll just be that first argument. False is also a variable that that resolves to false, and that's used here. Okay, so now that we pasted that, you'll see it's still not working because we haven't restarted the PowerShell. Again, you can just close it here and reopen it, or if you're already in PowerShell within command prompt, you can just type exit and then PowerShell, and you're back in PowerShell. And if I do touch, and let me open this folder, and let's get rid of all these. We don't need those directories anymore either. So touch test.txt, and that will create that file as well. And again, it'll have the correct line endings, and it won't have any size, which is what we want. Perfect. Okay. So that's basically all I wanted to go over in this video. Thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. Thanks.